grabbing hot dogs and beverages. My lovely assistant and student Tyler here and I are going to demonstrate a little bit of wrestling 101, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to lock up. This is what happens in almost every wrestling match. This is two rams, two bulls meeting each other. We're going to lock up. But if you're not careful when you lock up and go in there haphazardly, your opponent can use your momentum against you. So for example, I'm going to go in a little heavy-footed, a little over-anxious. My student Tyler here is going to use my momentum against me, and he's going to arm drag me. Luckily I'm trained, I know how to faults, I've taken it wrong too many times now, I know how to take it without killing myself. So if you would please, Tyler, give me a little arm drag at it. We're locking up, heavy. Arm drag like so. Is Tyler using my momentum against me? So, me being a trained wrestler and having had that happen to me too many times, I'm going to secure my foot down as to not get thrown, hopefully. Like so. That's what it does. I'm planted too heavy, and thank goodness I don't get arm drag. That's it, a little wrestling 101. Enjoy some Cheetos and some beverages. We'll get started back up in 5 minutes. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Your opening contest for this evening is scheduled for one fall.
Hello, my name is Brian Kendrick.
I am Eric Watts.
My name is Brandon Rickert.
I have been wrestling for 12 years now, almost 13, I think.
I first fell in love with wrestling going to a friend's house. It was WrestleMania 6, so say it's around 1990. Going over to play a board game, they were watching the main event of WrestleMania 6, Ultimate Warrior versus Hulk Hogan. I walk into the house as Ultimate Warrior's running down to the ring and decided I want to be that guy being the Ultimate Warrior. And would go to Videoland and rent every wrestling VHS I could find, and dreamt about doing it since then. And when I heard about a wrestling school when I graduated high school, I said, that's for me. And I've been chasing it for 22 years now.
I was really young. I mean, I always watched it when I was a kid, probably around 5 or 6 years old. The end of the Hogan era in WWF and the beginning of the Bret Hart era, when I really started to watch. Bret Hart was my favorite wrestler. I idolized him, and I just loved the colorful characters, and it just kind of caught my eye. I mean, as a kid, nothing was better than pro wrestling.
So the reason why I started wrestling is because I'm a gigantic fan. I'm also a big nerd. Wrestling to me is like real life superheroes and real life comic book, and to me it was a no-brainer. So, and I'm thankful that I had a growth spurt in high school. So here I am.
Started wrestling pro wrestling after having a wrestling school, and I would interview the students to do promos, and I would say, "This is Dickie Crickets from Wrestling Pro Wrestling. Ryan Morals, what do you have to say to the Wrestling Pro Wrestling audience?" And out of that, Ryan Klum, said, "You should call that a promotion. You should run student shows under Wrestling Pro Wrestling." And that was, geez, it's hard to say, but going on 10 years now. This was training at a place called the Santino Brothers Dojo. Been there for years, and this was prior to that at the Papi Pineda Dome. I know none of this will mean nothing to any of you, but that's how long ago.
I found out about WPW about, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago. I really don't know. Too many headshots to the head, but we found out about maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
I met Brian Kendrick about 7 or 8 years ago. I took a trip with him up north to this show called Hood Slam, which is a lot like WPW in that it's just kind of out of the ordinary with over-the-top characters, and it's just a fun show. It's not really serious. And we kind of bonded on that trip, and he said he was running shows WPW back then, and this was just, at this point, we didn't have any of the characters or costumes. It was just another wrestling show. It was really just a place for the local wrestlers to showcase their talents. So Brian asked me, "Hey, you want to wrestle on my show?" And I came to the first WPW show I worked at, and Brian's opponent for the day, this is before Brian went back to WWE, his opponent for the day didn't show up, so I asked him, "You want to wrestle?" And I got to wrestle Brian Kendrick in my first WPW show, and it's evolved into this whole new monster with original characters and crazy costumes, and it's just so creative. Like I feel like that's the best part about WPW, is just getting to utilize our creativity and make this goofy product that just makes us all happy.
Let me tell you about WPW. WPW is so much different than anything else out there. Every other wrestling promotion just has standard wrestling matches, standard wrestling promos, kind of the traditional what you expect. WPW takes that and dumps it in a frying pan, fries it up, dumps it out, puts it back in the frying pan, fries it again, puts it out, puts chocolate on it, and then throws it in the air. That's WPW. It's just complete chaos, and there's nothing like it, and I love it.
I think what makes Wrestling Pro Wrestling different is that we've got a group of guys that work really hard, real sincerely, which most do everywhere, but they take really absurd storylines that are thought out and years in the unraveling, and to do something so goofy, but to do it as if it were serious, I think makes it different. Where most comedy wrestling knows it's absurd, Wrestling Pro Wrestling pretends that it's not absurd.
I mean, we got these crazy over-the-top costumes and characters. They're all original, and they just kind of all flow together. And we also have our serious wrestlers like Fidel Bravo and Jark Sheik and Darwin. They're all in the mid-card title picture, and those are the guys that go out there and just have great wrestling matches. And then we mix that in with these crazy characters like Chow Mein Charlie and Frank and Peanut, Cereal Man, and all the mad scientist type of creations that we've made with these characters. And it all kind of blends together. It's like a Muppet show. It's like a little bit of everything. I think that's what makes WPW special, is we're very tongue-in-cheek. It's not serious. We have our serious moments and our good quality wrestlers, but we also have a lot of comedy that's really a lot of it's adult comedy, but I'd say the show is more PG-13 than anything. it's this perfect blend of comedy and quality wrestling that just sets the product apart from anything else.
As far as balancing working for the WWE, both as of late backstage and in ring as a performer and pro wrestling, it isn't really much of a balance for me. It's just two things I love doing. So, if I'm not at work for the WWE, then trying to work on pro wrestling. Unfortunately, it's been since March, since we got to do a show. We filmed some comedy bits since then, but to me, neither one of them is work because it's just what I love to do.
Being that I am a giant monster, I think it is far easier to beat up someone in a giant monster costume than it is to fight a standard wrestler, because giant monsters are just that. They're giant monsters and they don't move very well. So I can kind of capitalize on that, my free limbs, whereas the monsters are kind of, stuck doing this and are at a disadvantage.
It can be challenging, and there's only a very few people who really understand what you have to do in these costumes. Like, you have to think of yourself as like a sports mascot. Everything's big, exaggerated motions and body language to convey what a voice normally would convey. It's basically a silent film almost. So you have to over-exaggerate your body motions and really hit home what you're trying to convey with the characters. So it's tough, and it's not easy to breathe in those things either. If you look at the costumes, you're like, how does this guy breathe? And it's like, we don't breathe very well in them. So that's probably the biggest challenge. That's kind of an exaggeration on my part. I didn't almost die, but it was pretty brutal. We did this stunt with the Tickles monster, where if you've seen the Tickles monster costume, it's just this big furry Muppet looking thing. Tickles monster was getting his head ripped off by Giraffadora. So I had to wear another mask underneath, which was basically the apparatus was the neck. It was supposed to be the neck once the head was ripped off. So it was just this gory looking neck stump, which was the second mask I had to have on. And then there was also a third mask underneath that mask to keep the masks all in place. So it was really 3 masks I had to wear, 3 layers of masks. And I'm on the stairs getting ready to make my entrance and come out, and I couldn't breathe. I could barely see. I could probably see out, like, if you took your one eye and looked through your finger like that, that's probably the range of sight I had in this costume. So I'm on the stairs and getting ready to go out, and I just can't breathe. I can't see. I start getting claustrophobic and feeling like the walls are closing in on me, and I get really lightheaded. So I had to rip off the top mask and open up a little slat between the second mask and my face and drink like a whole bottle of water just to get my bearings, because I was really ready to pass out. It was super hot. I couldn't breathe. So I finally got to the point where I was going out there. And if you watch the match, you really can't tell unless you know that I'm dying in there, because I'm still moving around and stuff like that. But by the time he finally ripped my head off, I was just begging, please just end this match, because it goes on. It kind of gets dragged out in the beginning if you watch the match, because Giraffadora has these handlers. It's a 3-headed giraffe, and they had 3 different handlers holding each head. So each guy had to get in the ring, and it was this just long process for this short little stunt that we did. And I'm just dying in this costume, just praying to God, please don't let me die in this costume. It would be the most embarrassing death of all time. But yeah, that was definitely memorable. I still have nightmares about that whole scenario, just not being able to breathe and the walls closing in on me. But I mean, looking at the clip, it is definitely worth it. There's a kid in the crowd and made the kid cry, so mission accomplished.
As far as training wrestlers to do comedy, I would say the key is to just teach them how to be wrestlers. I think if you're trying to get them to be funny, it'll spoil the joke. If you know that you're a goof, then it's not funny. I guess kind of like the Three Stooges, they were plumbers trying to repair a house. and they'd get angry and smack each other around, but they didn't do it for laughs. They did it because they were sincere.
I think the main difference between wrestling in a comedic environment versus standard traditional style is that the audiences that come to comedy style wrestling shows are more open-minded, and they are more ready to receive the show that we give them. Whereas if you go to a standard wrestling show, you know, those fans will see, you know, high spots and that many drivers and this many, you know, flips and spins, that many chops. You know, that's what they kind of expect. But when you come to a wrestling show, you have no idea what to expect.
The funniest parts are probably the fan contests that we have at the beginning. We always just brutalize our fans, like with chowder or something, Bobby for apples in clam chowder, and there were no apples. It was just people bobbing for apples in this clam chowder, getting clam chowder all over, and it was disgusting. It was like a soy sauce challenge where we made people drink whole bottles of soy sauce, and we just torture our fans for the contests in order to win prizes. Come to wrestling for wrestling at your own risk, or at least participate in the contest at your own risk. So we have so many great moments though. We have so many great gimmicks, and the Halloween shows usually stand out as extra special.
So some of my favorite WPW matches include I had a match with Ray Roses not too long ago. I really liked that one. I had a few matches with Darwin Finch, and he took my belt away in one of them. Didn't appreciate that. But the response that everyone gave that match and the moment that he won was cool. I really liked the match I had against Santa's Little Helpers. They formed a Mega Elf and gave me a choke slam, and I thought, even though that hurt, it was hilarious, and I loved that. Yeah, I think those probably take it.